Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are coming to you live from the massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Good to have everybody back this week. A lot of big news this week in the last week or so, I'd say. And that's going to kick off this week's Cloud News of the Week. So really four big things that we kind of wanted to highlight for people this week in no particular order. The first one is that our good friends Mark Hinkle and Sebastian, who had previously been on talking about kubeless, both of them had previously been, working at cloud.com and were over at Citrix working on CloudStack and so forth. They just recently launched a company called TriggerMesh, and TriggerMesh is going to be focused on serverless management, really a lot of focus around Knative. So congratulations to both Mark and Sebastian and the whole team at TriggerMesh for launching the product and definitely launching into a very hot space here with Knative and serverless. Definitely a company we will have on the show here very, very soon. So congratulations to them. The next thing is our friends at HashiCorp, Mitchell and the rest of the team over there, just recently took $100 million in a new round of funding. That funding round put HashiCorp at a valuation of $1.9 billion. So congratulations to them both on the big funding round, to Mitchell, who recently just got married. So congratulations on that huge life event. And really, a company that when we had on years and years ago when they were just doing Vagrant and, barely breaking even, selling Vagrant to people that wanted to spin up local resources on their desktop to now being, a very, very large player in a lot of different infrastructure things, everything from Vagrant still to Terraform to Vault to Console to lots of different platforms in that space. So congratulations to that team. The third thing was today, November 6th, as we record this, VMware acquired Heptio. So Heptio, a company that was very focused on Kubernetes, was founded by a couple of the people who were part of the original Kubernetes team at Google, Craig McLuckie and Joe Beda. So they were recently acquired today by VMware. So congratulations to them. And I think what you're seeing so far in the first three stories is a couple of things. Number one, the market still very much is interested in open source, putting a lot of money into open source, and we're seeing a little bit of consolidation in the Kubernetes space. So, as some of the distributions and the companies focused on Kubernetes came to market, we're seeing some consolidation around that. And then the final one is probably the biggest story, really one of the biggest stories we've seen in the industry in a very long time, and that is IBM announcing its intention to acquire Red Hat for $34 billion. So I say big in terms of one of the largest software deals in the industry's history, $34 billion for Red Hat. That deal is slated to not close until sometime probably in the second half of next year due to regulatory stuff, IBM being a huge company and having to get through a lot of regulatory things in a lot of different countries, excuse me. And that's one that, unfortunately, due to my day job at Red Hat, I can't really comment upon. But, lots of, we'll put some things in the show notes about all of these things, some perspective from different analysts, from different industry third parties about all these acquisitions. And I think really what we're seeing this week was a lot of valuation put around open source software. That's something that obviously we've talked about a lot. We had JJ on recently to talk about, his whole idea around open source funding and open source valuations and so forth. But, open source having value, companies being willing to pay for it, whether those are VCs or larger companies, consolidation in the Kubernetes space. And, a lot of those things are topics that if you've been following this show for a long time, you're very, very aware of. But, really a lot of things happening here very quickly in the last week or so. So that's going to wrap it up for the Cloud News of the Week. Just like last week, we are very, very excited to have Datadog as a sponsor of our Cloud News of the Week. So today's show is sponsored by Datadog. Datadog, for those of you that don't know, and all of you should know about Datadog by now, Datadog's a cloud scale monitoring and analytics platform. Datadog was built to bring clarity to complex, dynamic applications, both in the public cloud, on premises, whether they're in containers, wherever you want to run those applications, Datadog can help you make sure that you're monitoring and analyzing them correctly. Datadog provides really powerful dashboards, seamless integrations with more than 250 technologies. So really all the technologies that you use today, whether they're in your data center or out in the public cloud, open source or vendor-driven technologies, they provide deep end-to-end visibility into the health and performance of modern applications. So as you're trying to visualize key metrics in your applications, you're trying to set alerts to identify anomalies or really collaborate with your team to troubleshoot and fix problems, Datadog is a great choice for helping you analyze and monitor those applications and ultimately make your business successful. So try it out yourself for free. You can start with a free 14-day trial today. Our listeners, Cloudcast listeners, will receive a free Datadog t-shirt. We've talked about the shirt in the past. It's a great shirt. I wear mine all the time. My daughter wears hers all the time. You can just go to bit.ly/Datadog-Cloudcast and tell them your friends at the Cloudcast sent you. If you sign up for a 14-day trial, you can try out the service. You get the t-shirt. So once again, that's bit.ly/Datadog-Cloudcast to sign up for your free 14-day trial, get your awesome t-shirt, and go give some love to the folks at Datadog. So with that, we're going to get to our interview. Aaron had a chance to sit down with a gentleman named Lee Eason, who is co-founder of Director of DevOps at Ipreo, co-founder of Tekata.io. Lee sat down with us at All Things Open in Raleigh and talked about their DevOps transformation. So Lee had gone through and had led a huge DevOps transformation at Ipreo. All of the organization's 30 or so software products, about 65 Scrum teams. So really walked us through tales from a DevOps transformation. It's a really good interview. Aaron got a chance to really kind of go in depth with Lee about the lessons they learned, how they were able to make these transformations, and ultimately what was the business impact for that. So with that, take a listen to Aaron's interview with Lee.
Okay, we're here at All Things Open 2018 here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Brian wasn't able to make it. It's just Aaron. And I'm here today with Lee Eason. We're going to be talking about Lee's upcoming session later today. So, Lee, why don't you give everyone a quick introduction and a little bit about the company that kind of brought you here as well?
Sure, yeah. So, Lee Eason, I've been at a company called Ipreo for about 3.5 years, a little over 3.5 years. And we were actually just acquired over the summer by a larger public company called IHS Markit. So Ipreo had about 30 financial related products and services. We sold software to big banks, and they would do things with our products like take companies public. So Facebook, Alibaba, Snapchat, the majority of IPOs happen on our platform. We also sold software to municipalities, so they would do things like raise bonds. So 98% of municipal bond raising in the U.S. happens on our platform. So almost any hospital or publicly funded, road, bridge, school would get funded through our software. And then we had products for small private companies too, to help them figure out what their valuation is and keep track of stock equity type of distribution. So big wide range. And now there's 60 financial related
we were talking about that before we hit record here. Your job just got a lot harder.
Yeah, well, a lot more exciting, I think.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. But we've been going through a big DevOps transformation over the past few years. And so we've really kind of fundamentally changed the way we bring products to production. And it's made for a lot of change for our teams. We have about 65 product teams just in legacy Ipreo. So a lot of change, a lot of really interesting stuff.
And how? So tell us a little bit about. Okay, there was this multi-year journey that you're going to be talking about later today. But set the stage. Where were you 3 years ago? What were some of the challenges?
Yeah. So, we had the kind of traditional IT group. I think many folks listening would relate to. You had very segregated IT. They took software from application development teams, actually engineered it into infrastructure. That was sort of a black box for most of our application development teams. They didn't have very much visibility into production. And what's interesting is when you start pulling on threads like that and you start trying to understand why things are set up the way that they are, you almost always find really good reasons, right? And I think it's tempting sometimes for us to throw rocks and stones, but the truth of the matter is people make the best decisions they can with the tools they have at the time. And so pulling all that stuff apart was a really kind of long process, but our application developers, getting more connected to production puts them more in contact with their customers, which leads to better quality. But yeah, it was a very different world 3 years ago.
Yeah, and so what were kind of some of the, everyone's always interested in those first baby steps, right? Everyone wants to know those first baby steps. How'd you get started? How'd you get the ball rolling? Mm-hmm. And then And then everyone wants to know the success story. So let's start with the baby steps, right? So
Sure.
what was kind of those first things you started to tackle and those first changes you started to make?
Yeah, so I kind of came up with this sort of 3-tiered approach: enablement, mentoring, and coaching. And what I did early on is I started doing a bit of research. And I needed to understand sort of on the spectrum of teams that were further along or already starting to try and make some progress themselves versus teams that really weren't aware of, how you could be doing things differently. Where were our teams? So I did some internal surveys. I asked them some subjective questions like, when it comes time to deploy your software, how do you feel? How confident are you in that? That's a really easy question to ask, and it's a 1 to 10 scale or 1 to 5 scale, so people can respond pretty quickly. And it tells you a lot about what's going on behind the scenes, right? So I was using data like that to try and figure out, okay, where are the big hotspots? Where are the problem areas from a technology perspective? And then I would ask other questions, right? I'd start to just have conversations with dev leads and tech leads, and I'd try and get a feel for them about who are my eager beaver adopters, right? And then the third thing that I started trying to figure out was, from a business growth perspective, where was the company trying to make investments and grow and accelerate or improve quality? And you take kind of the convergence of those 3 angles, and that tells you where your shorted weighted job first is, right?
Sure.
So then that's who you're going to partner with in the beginning really closely. Now you're going to, you don't want to discriminate necessarily. So you're going to provide tools for the whole company. You're going to provide services for the whole company. But when I came time to choose where am I going to spend my time, I wanted to focus on the area that was a growth area for the company. I had eager beaver adopters, and I had teams that were at least already interested in making the right steps in the right direction. That's where you get your baby steps from, right? And when you get those early wins inside those areas, it makes it much easier then to spread that out across the other groups. And so, there were folks that were not buyers of what I was trying to sell, but I just didn't spend a lot of time on those folks because there were plenty of other opportunities where, making an investment in time or tools would yield a really good return. Over time, the business leads from those sort of slow adopters started to see, wow, there's a really big difference in Net Promoter Score. There's a big difference in quality and throughput of value to our customers in these areas. So why aren't my teams doing this? And so then the pressure comes from the business lead or the line of business head, not from some random guy that got brought in to fix everything.
Right. Well, and I really like that approach as well because a lot of fans of the podcast that have been listening for a long time remember, way back when there was the release of the Phoenix Project, and it tells a very classical story. But the one thing it's always done is it tells that story from there's one person who's in charge of the department and the team, but you're coming at it from an angle of you have a lot of teams, and so you have to pick and choose and get your buy-in in a very, very different way. It's a very matrixed kind of organization when it comes to getting those kinds of results. Now, flip that on its head for a second. Not just, obviously one challenge is going to be status quo, but what are some of the other, typical challenges you faced really early on? I know, like, for instance, one that kind of surprised me in your abstract, you mentioned security. And we tend to try and avoid the topic just solely because Brian and I, we're not from that background and we know enough to be really dangerous. So tell us, and that was a fascinating, one that you kind of put in the abstract. So tell us, what are some of those challenges?
Yeah, you work in financial technology, you can't avoid it.
Of course.
Right? It is at the core of everything we do. And we made some overtures early on where we said quality is owned by the whole team. I think that's a pretty common thing you'll hear from folks. Quality is owned by the whole team. But we had to also say security is owned by the whole team. And this is a conversation we have even with broader IHS market, and we talk about who's really ultimately responsible for guaranteeing quality, and it has to be the application delivery teams. The challenge is in how are you enabling them to do that and not sacrifice speed and throughput? How are you teaching them what they need to know? Right? So when we talk about things like, I want to make it easier to deploy changes into production, how are you guaranteeing that you're only deploying changes to production that you're aware of and that you want to deploy to production, right? Are there possibilities? Like, what are you doing to think about internal bad actors? What safeguards do you have in place to make sure you don't have someone inside the company who's been compromised? These are the things that happen, and most security incidents actually come from that type of direction. So I think a lot of thought leaders in DevOps, myself included, have a very lofty opinion of people who do software development. But the truth is, when you work in a company like IHS Markit or any other financial company, or companies that deal with personal information or healthcare, you have to think a little more defensively, and you have to set up these really cool automation pipelines with an eye toward how am I doing this in a way that I'm guaranteeing the safety of my customers' data, so that I'm not putting someone at risk on the altar of moving faster.
And how much of that comes from a knowledge of DevOps and the background you have there, or how much of that is also just you have a very specific SaaS platform background, and you've been doing that for a number of years, and it's been interesting because we've talked about it on the podcast a number of times, but to be quite frank, to have somebody from Raleigh with that kind of background is kind of exceptional. And so, tell everyone a little bit about kind of the growth of, maybe that intersection, if you will, of SaaS platforms and DevOps, because most people are just used to consuming a SaaS platform. It's the platform. Yeah. Right. And then, how did you handle that? Because you're kind of handling the flip side of that a bit.
Yeah. Let me try and piece together an answer to that.
Yeah.
So.
No, yeah. That one wasn't scripted, so go ahead.
I love it. I mean, SaaS software as a service is a great enabling innovation, right? It allows a provider to get value into the hands of their customers really quickly, and it's enabled a whole different class of companies and products. It's really exciting. Kind of the way that, then Amazon and public cloud comes along and they say, oh, you can consume your infrastructure through this API. That's a new kind of innovation, and it enables a whole new class of products and ways to do business. DevOps is, if I'm talking to a startup, it's a very different type of conversation, right? That's just the way that you do work. It's the way that you engineer your development, kind of the approach to building software. And for SaaS, that delivery pipeline can be measured in minutes, right? So the time that a valuable code change sits on the shelf is very short. If I'm delivering software to a desktop environment and to a mobile application, it's really difficult to get it down to that speed. It's almost impractical. But that's kind of the neat opportunity for DevOps with SaaS companies is you can deliver new features and value, whether that's bug fixes or whatever, to your customers in minutes from the time that it's done. From the time that a developer writes it. And so that's inventory not sitting on a shelf, right? So if I'm running Office Max or Staples or whatever, I don't want inkjet cartridges on the shelf because I've bought them and they're just sitting there, right? And they're not actually providing any value to me as the store owner. And if I'm running a software development shop and I have coders who have written valuable changes, and that code is committed and it's done and it's ready for customers, but it's not in front of customers. It's just inventory on a shelf. So DevOps for SaaS is a huge return on investment. When you think about technical process improvement, you're actually lowering your liabilities and you're maximizing your investment in software development. And
what would you say, because you kind of live in the DevOps space day in and day out, what is your opinion of the industry or the movement of DevOps? Or I shouldn't call it an industry. Over the last couple of years, it seems to be making very good progress. And if you go look at the DevOps Enterprise Summit, there's it's customer driven at this point. Is that a trend you're seeing of it's the adoption is increasing and it is becoming more important? And is it a little bit like your original journey of you had to do it?
Yeah, yeah, it is customer driven, right? And it's funny, 3.5 years ago, our business leads, I don't think they certainly didn't understand what DevOps was. And to be honest, I didn't understand what DevOps was, right? What happened was our business leads were saying, look, our customers are upset because we're not able to get changes to them fast enough or reliably enough. It takes too long to get things done. Our lead time isn't where it needs to be. So even without metrics showing that, it was intuitively obvious that was a problem, right? Where I see the DevOps movement where today it's really exciting, actually, because a few years ago, it was really we hyper-focused on tools. And you had the chief technology officer, chef, saying things like, behaviors reinforce tools and tools reinforce behaviors. So if you want to change behaviors, change the tools. I think there's wisdom in that, but I think we hyper-focused on tools instead of recognizing that what we're really trying to do with DevOps is we're correcting a long, slow process where we've formed a habit of not investing in things we should have been investing in.
Yeah.
Right? It's a fundamental misunderstanding about how to produce software. Our business executives don't understand the craft of software development. They don't understand how investments in technical process improvement lead to better business outcomes. So that voice has been missing. DevOps is kind of stepping in, and it's helping them understand that problem, right? So we don't have a tooling problem. We have a habit problem, and that's a tough habit to break, right? We're talking about behavior change, and we're dealing with people's values that have been reinforced with annual bonuses, with performance reviews for years and years or decades.
Yep.
That's a very difficult thing to change.
Yeah, and it's almost like the intersection of two data center trends. The first one being, and this one has always been this way for as long as I've been in this industry, the idea of IT is a cost center a lot of times, right? Yeah. And so keep the margins or keep the budget down as much as you can, but keep the lights on and keep everything running. But then you have the idea of software and the software front end moving the business significantly, and so now you're completely cutting off the revenue stream, and so it is forcing this transformation and this change going forward. So no, it's fascinating stuff. Yeah,
it really is. I mean, certainly I want to spend money really wisely, right? I don't want to waste money. But I also recognize that if we're selling a software-based product, then at the end of the day, what I'm selling is the output of somebody at a keyboard typing on their keyboard, right? Writing some code. And that person's ability to do that really, really well makes a huge difference for my business. And I need to understand how to help that person master that craft. Because if they're masters of their craft, I'm going to have a Slack product as opposed to, a HipChat product.
Yep.
Right? And I think that's something that companies like Slack get. They just fundamentally understand that the user experience is driven by mastery of that technical tool. It's the analogy I use a lot of times is like if you think of a painter, they wrestle with their materials. They wrestle, their brush is annoying because the horsehair keeps falling out, or the canvas is too porous, or the oils are too runny and I put too much thinner in them, or, right? I think, software developers, whether you're in UX or you're coding a backend, we likewise wrestle with our materials to try and translate this creative thing, this concept in our heads into something real, concrete. And the better that those people are at mastering that, the better product I'm going to get. It's going to make me more competitive in the marketplace.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So, Lee, we're going to kind of wrap on that then. Where can everyone find out more about you, find out more about the talk, your company?
Yeah, so you can find us online at ihsmarket.com. You can reach me on Twitter at Lee J. Eason. And, of course, I'm on LinkedIn as well. I'd love to engage on Twitter or LinkedIn.
Okay, and probably at an upcoming DevOps Days as well, correct?
Yeah. I'll be at, of course, I'm speaking today here, but I'll be at TechWell East in Orlando in a couple weeks.
Fantastic. All right.
Thanks so much, Aaron.
Absolutely. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.